By the way, I'm gonna inject commentary here, but if someone can let me know in the chat maybe how to get rid of the delay. If there's still a delay on OBS, that might be getting in the way of some of the smoothness of this stream. But this is the moment, in my opinion, that Rushton loses the crowd, and history may have been written very differently if Rushton had spent the next 20 minutes doing a different route. If he had stuck to the things more closely irrefutable, more closely aligned to hard biology, like twinning rates, like skeleton structure, like height, and not so much on things related to sociability. Because the sociability things, everybody knows that different life circumstances can make you more or less sociable in different circumstances. For example, if you have a bad breakup, you're going to maybe be less aggressive or more aggressive for a week, right? There are these kinds of esoteric arguments about how there's genetic inheritance that affects you. It's not esoteric. I mean, it is scientific. It's straight scientific. The fact is, your genetic predisposition towards personality is ironclad. I mean, it's a rock solid thing. That's why dog breeds have different personalities. So it is with every single ethnicity, very slightly on average, and has different standard deviations and means. But now the point that I'm trying to draw attention to here is that to this point, Rushton has been pretty flawless. But this is a moment where he begins to lose the crowd by diving into esoterica, which is something that I think we should take with us as a lesson for avoiding. We can talk about esoterica amongst ourselves, but leadership or people who are talking to people outside this community should avoid esoterica unless they're in friendly company. Just my thoughts on tactics and strategy. I'm going to point that out here.
For sociability, ask people how many parties they've been to in the last 14 days. Were they large parties? How many friends do they have? For cautiousness, ask people if they always wear a seatbelt. Don't limit yourself to one question. Ask many questions. Get a representative score. If you think that this is absolutely crazy to suggest, do the studies, do it scientifically, learn how to do the methodology, and then show that the rank ordering that I predict will occur, show that it does not occur. That's science, that disproves me. Moral invective that my opponent has shown doesn't add very much to anything. Indeed, even intelligence and brain size can be examined. Take a tape measure. Put it around people's heads. Measure the head circumference. It is a very crude measure indeed. But try, after you've collected that data, relating it to the grades that the students get. Now, I admit you will have to have a large sample, and I admit you may even have to take body size into account. I have done the study twice myself, and I have found a small positive correlation between head size measured externally from around the head, and IQ test scores and grades. Laugh if you want to. Laugh and make as much ridicule as you like, but the best way to show me that I'm wrong is to do the study and publish it in a scientific journal. Although getting a handle on genetics is much more difficult, there may even be ways to do this. Ask people who have achieved well, let us say university students or their fathers. Now ask whether that target person's next youngest brother did as well. No, wait. There is a genetic prediction to be made. The genetic prediction is that Oriental brothers will be more similar in high achievement than, say, Caucasian brothers. That is, there will be less statistical regression to a low population mean. The main point I'm trying to make is that this is a scientifically researchable area that has not been researched for a long time because of political arguments such as the kind that we've heard from Dr. Suzuki, and I'm suggesting that it is perfectly scientifically respectable, and you all, if you want to, can do that kind of study yourselves. Thank you.
I didn't choose to discuss the points he raised because I tried to point out very clearly that Bodmer and Cavalli-Sforza indicate that the genetic relationship or the correlation of the genetic basis that allows comparison between races is simply not possible. And I did not hear you rebut that in any way. And that is the definitive work. Now, Rushton demands that his work be addressed as legitimate science. If this is representative research in psychology, then I think psychologists ought to really tremble about that. First of all, the concept of race has long been discarded as a meaningful biological category. There's more variation genetically within a so-called race than there is between the means of the two groups.
Therefore, we can discard all of the limits about blood donors, right? Or like or kidney donors. I mean, like, God, and the list goes on and on and on. But I'm not here to talk about the science. I mean, everyone, I think most people in the chat here already know the 10,000 different logical fallacies Suzuki commits. I mean, it's just clear he doesn't know anything about the topic. But I'll show you guys the Cavalli-Schwarz paper in a bit.
In other words, there are very few genes involved in making us racially distinct. Under Oriental, we include not just Japanese, Chinese, Filipinos, Indonesians, but Inuit and Amerindians. Now, Inuit and Amerindians are the most recent derivatives from the
and they're racially distinct. They are. You gonna say they're not? No, you're not.
Chinese of the Japanese populations, but they kind of mess up Rushton's idea of this progressive relationship. So how does he deal with that? He says, well, they're an anomaly. Boy, with that kind of selectivity, I could prove anything. Are whites a homogeneous group? I've just come back from Brazil, and man, those are white people down there. They're also East Indians who are Aryans, Arabs, as well as all of the Europeans and Americans. Is that some kind of homogeneous group? What the hell does white mean?
So that's where we are, right? Of course, if you asked him what black means, of course, well, black identity is real. Black, you have to respect blackness, and black is a thing, but white, what is white, right? I mean, I think the best. This is the continuum fallacy, obviously, but I think the easiest way that I have for explaining this to normies when this comes up in the context that it does, maybe I've been a little bit too brave about this in airports lately, but is to think about it like the color green. Like what is green? Well, green is obviously a color. Just because something belongs on a continuum, on a spectrum, doesn't mean that every individual point doesn't exist. It does, obviously. Right? That's like saying height doesn't exist because people vary. People vary by height, so height is immeasurable. Right? But these are the dumb arguments that work. But remember, because it was never about the arguments, it was always about the political power. And I'll get into the diversity industry aspect of that right now. I'm still encoding. My diversity industry video is still encoding. It's been encoding for like 2 hours. A lot of effects on it. But all right, back to history.
You could say the same about blacks. We know that blacks in North America have a lot of white genes in there as well. There's been a lot of crossbreeding there. What does it mean to say these races mean something? And the classes that Rushton thinks are somehow biologically meaningful, litter size. Why not just say family size? Is it supposed to mean that we're like animals? I mean, if we go and study the Quebecois in Quebec before...
Yes, because it's animal behavior. So this is the funny thing. I mean, one of the things, like 11 years ago, when I was in college for taking an animal behavior class, I mean, I remember this. It's so funny. Like, you're allowed to talk about absolutely everything except this in science. And it really is because race was the battering ram that made Marxism possible in America. I had a thread on this back in August. This is what a lot of people don't understand about the difference between communism as Marx posited it and cultural Marxism as the Frankfurt School transmuted it, which is that the Frankfurt School infused race into Marxism to make a kind of racial oppressor-oppressed dynamic. So obviously, any kind of honest racial studies completely destroys the political power underpinning all of the communist machine that has taken over America. And we shouldn't kid ourselves about this. Communism is just authoritarian liberalism. That's all it is. Okay, just like fascism is authoritarian, right wing. Communism is just authoritarian left wing. Do you or do you not believe that we live in an authoritarian left wing culture? Obviously we do. From the media, to social media, to your public school education, K through 12, higher education, college, law school, med school, you name it. It is communism that we live under, and it is racial communism that made it that way. Because of the battering ram, because of demographic, in a representative democracy, you can get mass block voting by appealing to identity politics. But wait a minute, we'll get to that another time. But back to the matter at hand.
And after the Quiet Revolution, Jean Chrétien came from a family of over 17. That wasn't unusual. The enormous impact of religion and environment on litter size. I mean, how are we supposed to take this seriously?
Because it's a common term in science, in animal behavior. Studying humans in a detached way as you would study animals. Because you're trying to get to the truth. The only reason you would disagree with that is if you put politics above truth. So which one do you value more? Dr. Suzuki